Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the My Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a topic I want to dive into, and it's going to be around GLP-1s. I haven't really done any sort of content around this, so I want to go over the different types of GLP-1s, what they actually do, why they can be effective, what we can learn from them, some things that you need to look out for and make sure that they are getting in their diet, nutrition, lifestyle, training, etc. But first, before I go into that, if you haven't yet, make sure you download my free body recomp checklist. So I go over 10 things you need for a body recomp, and really 10 things are going to maximize body composition, things that you need to have in there. But I also go over what body recomp is, two different types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on body composition, and then obviously those 10 things there. So if you are interested in that, make sure you go grab that. The link to that is in the show notes. So again, as I said, I want to go over GLP-1s here today. I don't really have any sort of dive into these. And so I think this would be a good thing to just help reference people who are considering them or again, have questions on them. And just so you can understand my thoughts on them to see if, what I think about them. So let's first start with the different kinds, right? Because a lot of people just think GLP-1, they'll typically just think of like Ozempic or, whatever it may, right? Like people have whatever ones there that, you think about, but there's actually different kinds. So let's first talk with GLP-1 receptor agonists. So these are the originals, right? So these mimic the glucagon like peptide 1 hormone, which slows gastric emptying, enhances satiety, improves insulin sensitivity, right? So it's just a GLP-1 receptor agonist from there. So these are going to be your Ozempics, Wegovy, which would be semaglutide, and then there's liraglutide, which is Victoza and Saxenda there. And so these are typically injections. And again, they primarily target GLP-1 receptors, which again helps slow gastric emptying, but it also helps increase satiety from there. And I'll talk about why these can be effective for people as well too. But again, the downside with this is there can potentially, with these ones, there's a higher risk of lean mass loss with these if we're not doing the things that we're going to talk about today. Okay. So that's those brands. So, understanding that these ones are going to each do something a little bit different, right? So then we have the dual agonists. So this is GLP-1 plus GIP. So these are going to be like your tirzepatide, which would be Mounjaro, Zepbound. So again, they have that dual mechanism, which equals greater appetite suppression and metabolic effect, right? And these may preserve muscle a bit better than pure GLP-1 agonists, but again, I think what we actually do in the process is going to be the most important, but just understand that these tend to be a little bit better from a lean body mass preservation standpoint. And in the research, these often lead to faster, more total weight loss than just your GLP-1 receptor agonists. And then now we have, and these are going to be newer ones that you'll see come out over the next couple of years. And that's going to be your triple agonist. Okay. So this is going to be GLP-1 plus GIP plus glucagon, right? So they're still in trials, but retatrutide is basically what that new one's going to be. So again, it's aimed to combine satiety, glucose control, and fat oxidation effects. Early trials show very high efficacy, but muscle retention is still a question. And again, these may come into market within, the next couple of years. So it's like an even stronger version of them. So it's like basically each one, they find other ways to go about it, and it makes it even stronger. So again, so those are the different types. Right now, the main ones, the ones that you're going to find and you're going to get prescribed are the GLP-1 receptor agonists and then the dual agonists from there. So what do GLP-1s actually do? So they slow gastric emptying, and then they increase satiety. And because of that, because they do both of those things, they reduce appetite. When people ask, well, like, what's the mechanism at which you would drop body fat? Is there some magic to it? No, there's no fat burning magic to it. It's just, again, when we think of the energy balance equation, you have calories in, you have calories out. And so these work on satiety. So you're less hungry, which means you're less likely to bring calories in. Okay. So when you bring less calories in, you're tipping that energy balance in your favor of it being more likely that you are going to lose body fat. Right. And so where these can be really impactful are on people who have some sort of appetite dysregulation, because what you see, these are people who have, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and then obesity as well too, right? Because people's hunger cues are just, and satiety signals are just out of whack when you get to these kind of states of metabolic health where that's an issue. And again, these levels of obesity. So, you see a lot of people be like, oh, well, you just need to eat less and, it's your fault. That's why you're overweight. And again, like there's some, like there are there's choices that people can make that, can get them into a better energy balance, and they could probably save some calories. However, I think where a lot of people get lost that have never been in that state before is they don't understand like their hormonal signals. Basically, everything that subconsciously drives what you do. It's just a little bit different from someone who is in better shape versus someone who is overweight. So it's kind of hard to put yourself in those person's shoes to be like, well, just eat less, because we don't really know like the kind of internal battle. And again, that kind of hormonal response that people have that lead to them overeating. And again, there's just that appetite dysregulation from people there. So what these do is they help people stay full to where they're not constantly feeling like they need to eat. And again, they don't have, it gets their appetite regulation more in check, right? It leads it more towards the satiety side of things versus always being hungry, which what happens when you're always hungry? Well, you're more likely to make choices that are going to lead to a higher caloric intake. And so you're always going to be at that energy balance where you're at maintenance or even a small surplus, right? And then that just continues down this path of being it being very challenging to be in a energy deficit. And then obviously, anytime you do, even if you are, in shape, like anytime you're in a deficit, like hunger ramps up. So, again, you could think that there's just an even higher likelihood of that. And, when we look at people who maybe aren't in the greatest shape, like from a lifestyle perspective, there's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit things that also put them in a situation where, it's just they're not as in good of a environment to lose body fat, because again, the lifestyle habits are leading it towards a higher caloric intake from there, whether that be from poor sleep, high stress, poor ways to manage stress, sedentary lifestyle, high processed food consumption, poor meal timing. All these things are going to lead to people having a higher risk of wanting to consume more food. And so again, these GLP-1s can come in and they can blunt some of that appetite and help with your appetite regulation, and now it's easier to consume less calories. But the fundamental principle of energy balance is still there, and we still have control over the energy outside of things, and that's where the lifestyle comes into play. But the main mechanism is it's going to lower the energy inside of things there, and this can be a good way to jumpstart people getting into good habits. If you can't ever get to the point where you see any sort of progress, well, like from a mental standpoint, it's going to be hard to like ever feel like you're going to be able to do anything. And so I think these can give people some quick wins, and that they can see things trend down. It's like, okay, wow, there's actually nothing wrong. Like I can lose some weight, right? It builds confidence. And, when you build that confidence and then they start to maybe, in a good scenario, they're exercising, then they start to realize how much better they feel. And then it's that vicious cycle, right? We're getting momentum heading in the right direction. I think really when it comes down to a lot of fitness and nutrition stuff, getting people to get momentum rolling is really the best thing you can do, right? Like my job as a coach, it's like always, okay, how do I get us in that positive cycle versus that vicious cycle where, everything just, you just go in that downward spiral with everything. And so what can we learn from them? Well, we can learn how appetite regulation actually works as well, right? Like we know that that's a huge player in all this. So it can help us realize how appetite regulation works. But again, I have to stress, like the big thing though with this is they're not magically going to help you drop body fat. They're getting you into a negative energy balance through moderating the energy inside of the equation there. But anytime we do that, anytime we moderate one side, it can impact the other side of the energy equation, right? So calories out may go down a little bit, and that may be monitored, but that are changed a little bit. But also what we do in the process is also super important because, again, at the end of the day, we still need to build some habits in this process to make sure that we get the most out of these medications. So let's talk about, what are some things that, if I were to work with someone who's on a GLP-1 or somebody said they were on one, here would be some things I would tell them to focus on. And so again, just to kind of sum up the first part, like GLP-1s can absolutely be helpful tools under the right circumstances. If you have a significant amount of weight to lose or you struggle with appetite regulation, they can definitely help with this process to help get weight off. I don't think there needs to be I don't think people need to feel bad for taking them. I think that they, again, they can be super helpful as long as it's for the right reasons there, right? And so I think if you only have, 5 to 10 pounds to lose and you are trying to get on these, I don't think that's necessarily the right case for these. But again, I always come back to they aren't magic. And so, what you do is still important, and we still need to develop these lifestyle habits in combination with taking this medication. But, some people that are hardcore fitness influencers and hardcore in fitness will kind of poo-poo on these drugs. And I just don't think that that's the right thing to do, right? If people want to get in better health and they need something to help them with that, and again, we do the right things and they are safe, why would we not use that to our advantage? But again, they do come with some downsides that most people overlook. And if you don't address these, you lose more than just body fat. I also do feel like a lot of these people that will take these type of drugs, they tend to be people that, and this is just a generality, this isn't true across the board, but I would imagine if you were to take most people, it's like they're going to lean towards feeling like that, not really taking, how do I want to say this? they're more likely to feel like there's some magic to supplementation or medication, right? Like they tend to be people that are going to kind of make that like, if I just have this one thing, or what's that one supplement? I feel like it leads to people catering more to that type of person. Again, not the case across the board, but just generally speaking. And so to me, that can lead to people not focusing on these lifestyle factors that are super important, right? But the main risk is losing lean body mass. And obviously with that, there's going to be other issues in terms of overall function. When we don't have as much lean body mass, you lose a function, but also from like a metabolic rate standpoint, you're going to hurt yourself with that. You're going to hurt your overall body composition. You're not going to feel as good. You're not going to look as good when you drop weight. And because of the decreased metabolic rate, that may impact your ability long term to maintain that weight loss and continue to drop more body fat. So the biggest thing that we need to look at is the lean body mass, but also digestive issues are the other big thing at play here that we would need to look at. So here's what we need to prioritize with those things. So first, protein. So hunger's going to drop, right? When you take these medications, you're going to not want to eat, which means so does food intake. So you'll need to plan enough protein daily to protect your muscle. So at a minimum, we want 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, but just to make it simple, I think around 1 gram per pound of body weight is fine. However, people that are going to take this are typically on the overweight side. So, again, maybe going to that 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is going to be a sweet spot for you. At a minimum for women, I'm just a crude number. I would say anywhere from 100 to 120 grams of protein per day. For men, probably anywhere from 120 to 140 per day, just across the board there with that. But if we want to make it more personalized and really max that side of things out, probably going up to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight there. And then resistance training. So this is your best defense against muscle loss. So I think 2 to 3 times a week, we need to do some form of resistance training. When we look at lean body mass loss, muscle's important, or it is important for lean body mass loss. But if we look at lean body mass loss, protein is important, but we need to send that signal to our body to keep and or build muscle. And if we're not actively resistance training, it's not going to hang on to any muscle that it doesn't feel like it needs, especially when we're dropping weight. And if you're also someone who, now like your appetite's not there, now you're under consuming food, you're really low intake, so you're in a larger calorie deficit, you're losing weight quickly, you're going to be at a higher risk of losing lean body mass. So we need to resistance train to send that signal. You could be eating enough protein, and that's good. Like I still would recommend that for people to eat enough protein, but if you're not resistance training, you're still going to be losing some lean body mass as your weight trends down and the quicker it trends down. So we need to make sure that we're doing some form of resistance training paired with protein. Again, you could just take protein, but you still also need to or you could increase your protein, but you also need to make sure you're resistance training. The other big thing is going to be micronutrition, right? So most people are going to be eating fewer calories, which means they're going to be having fewer nutrients, especially if you aren't eating a high quality diet. If you just, take these medications and now you eat the same types of food, you don't really have any structure to your nutrition, but you just eat less overall and maybe more processed food, but just less of it. Again, now we're missing out on probably some protein, fiber, and the micronutrients that we need, right? So think more colorful foods, plus a good quality multi to fill in gaps. And other strategic supplementation that these are kind of my foundational supplements would be magnesium, vitamin D, fish oil, and creatine. So we still want to make sure we take those, and we need to make sure that we are still getting in some whole foods in our diet. Yes, you'll consume less calories with a GLP-1, but if you just eat more processed food, like you're probably going to you will eat less calories, but again, processed type foods are they're easier to overeat. So you could still be consuming a bit more calories. So you could be getting a little bit more out of the medication if you eat more whole foods, but really the big thing being the micronutrition more than anything, that and the fiber as well too. You also need lifestyle habits. We need to focus on improving our nutrition habits, right? So we don't just want to skip meals and skip calories where you don't, you only have one meal, and your goal is just, hey, I'm just skipping meals all the time versus being consistent with better food choices there. So we still need to work on these nutrition habits, eating in a relaxed state, making sure that you're really slowing down, chewing your food. Like these are super important. Good meal timing. So making sure that, like I said, you're fairly consistent with how many meals you have per day, and you're not just like skipping meals. I mean, that's the best way I could say it is, a lot of people they get these appetite suppressing medications and things, and then they just skip meals, and now we're not doing ourselves any favor. We need to still eat, like I talked about, consistently, just higher quality food. And you might have to, make yourself eat a little, like, we obviously never want to eat to where we're like completely stuffed, but making sure you get enough micronutrition and protein is going to be super key, and fiber as well too. But again, we also need to make sure we learn how to manage overall stress load on the body. What are some things we can do to improve that, put your body in a better position to just be in a good spot from a health perspective, but also to see the body comp change that we want. Because again, you could be taking these, but then, lifestyles, the overall stress load on your body super high, sleep still poor, paired with poor nutrition habits. And it's like, yeah, you'll lose some weight, but again, it's going to be kind of built on a shaky foundation there. Staying hydrated, making sure you're well hydrated. If you need electrolytes, if you're someone who sweats a lot, you're losing a lot of weight, you are eating really low calorie, you might need a little bit of some electrolytes into your program. Improving your circadian rhythm and health, your circadian health and sleep. So again, getting that dialed in, making sure, you get some sunlight throughout the day. We're going to sleep at a fairly regular time. We're avoiding blue light super late at night. Again, these are things that we need to make sure we do on top, taking these. Again, that's just going to set your body up for, again, long-term health. It's going to solidify these habits. You're going to have a better base and foundation to go off of when and if you decide to come off of this medication. And then still prioritize daily movement. Like, we still need to make sure we're moving. As I talked about before, the main mechanism for these medications is they're going to lower the calories inside of things. As I said, when you lower that and you change one variable on one side of the energy balance equation, the other one will change a little bit. So you may find that your total daily energy expenditure slightly goes down a little bit from losing weight, from eating less. And if you don't move a lot, it's going to be lower. So we can bring that up, and we can kind of increase that gap a little bit by making sure you move plenty, getting a minimum of 6,000 to 8,000 steps per day. Plus, that is also going to help with some lean body mass retention as well too. So if you absolutely cannot weight train, like getting in some movement, like you must do that in the process. And again, we want to monitor biofeedback. So we want to pay attention to your body, right? I like to have clients check in weekly and ask questions around like stress, sleep, energy, digestion, training performance, etc. And then also tracking markers like your blood work, your resting heart rate, and your HRV can be super helpful to see, one, from a blood work perspective, by taking this medication, am I now eating less food overall? So I'm taking in less nutrients, and now I have some sort of micronutrient deficiency, or is something else going on? There's some stress on the body, right? Blood work can kind of help decipher that. But then also resting heart rate and HRV can also tell you the kind of overall stress load your body's under. For a lot of people, when they lose some weight, the stress load on their body comes off. But now it could be, if you don't have good lifestyle habits from a sleep perspective, high stress, you're not moving, poor circadian hygiene. So you still may have a high stress load on your body, which is going to put you at a higher risk of losing lean body mass. So we need to make sure that these are in check, and we need to monitor that to make sure that we're also watching our overall stress load on our body in this process to make sure that's in a good spot. So when I talk like, hey, you don't want to lose weight too fast. Like, if you lose weight too fast, you're going to be at a higher risk of muscle loss. For most people, that is not a concern because of the natural mechanisms that are in place. Our body's responses to an energy deficit. It just gets very challenging over multiple weeks on end. Like, people in the short term, 2 to 3 weeks at a time can really restrict calories and be in a large deficit. But eventually there's just that natural pull from your body to consume more calories and to move less. And a lot of it's subconscious, to where we really don't have to worry about people losing weight too quickly if they're not using anything, to where muscle loss is going to be a huge factor. Like I said, in the short term, that can definitely happen, but over the long term, unless somebody just kind of has that sort of personality where they get like super into one thing and like they're all in, and they can kind of like force their way to quick weight loss for an extended period of time, but then it always comes back later on, right? Again, for a lot of people, that's really just not a concern, because it's just, again, there's just too many internal mechanisms that are going to push people to not being in a large energy deficit for extended periods of time. Again, there's that subset of the population where that can still certainly happen. And so for a lot of people, I've kind of been saying like, or I just haven't really been mentioning too much about like too fast of a rate of loss to lose muscle, because it's just not a concern for most people. These medications are definitely things that are going to sort of rewire those internal mechanisms that are now going to lead to a higher chance of people losing weight quickly, and a quick rate of loss is going to put somebody at a higher risk of lean body mass loss there. And so that's why I wanted to go over this. And so even if you aren't on GLP-1s, again, if you do lose weight quickly, like, these are still things that we would want to have in check. But especially if you're on GLP-1s, we need to make sure we look at this. Also, really pay attention to your gut health. That's going to be super important with GLP-1s. Again, if we're having constipation, diarrhea, bloating, uncomfortableness in our gut, like, there's something going on that we need to fix there. That's not a normal thing. And you shouldn't really just push through that there. So definitely want to make sure you get that checked out for sure. And then, from my understanding of the research, these medications aren't just naturally going to cause people to lose muscle. It's, again, the physiology of quick weight loss combined with not resistance training, not enough protein, poor micronutrition that is going to put and because they are powerful in terms of the appetite suppression, people really do eat less calories. That's where the issue comes in terms of the lean body mass loss. But if we do these things, we'll be in a good spot there. So let's say you're coming off. I think the best thing you could do is try and go cold turkey. Work with your doctor to taper off while focusing on strength, protein, and lifestyle habits. That's what's really going to help prevent the rebound weight gain. But what's automatically going to help prevent the rebound weight gain is working on these habits in that process, right? While taking it, because then these are ingrained and now it's going to be easier transition. You've already done it. Whereas, again, a common thing that I feel like people would say would be like, oh, when I'm off this, then I'll start focusing on my health and nutrition and training. I'm just going to do this to lose weight and then I'll focus on that. And then they come off and then now things are haywire and now they're back where they were before, right? So the best thing you can do is just work on these things right off the bat. While you're doing that, and then potentially coming off cold turkey. I think the more ingrained you are with your habits from day to day, the easier it might be to come off cold turkey, but it's still probably tapering off is going to be the best. Again, these medications can help those who would otherwise have a tough time losing weight to improve their health, but you must understand that there are still things you need to do to get the most out of them. And so losing weight doesn't lead to other long-term health issues, which it certainly can. It's just unfortunate that, the goal of these is to get people in better health, but in that process of getting people in better health, other things go haywire, which, is a lot of what happens, with sort of the more, reactive kind of, medications, things like that, versus, trying to be more preventative on the front side. Again, you kind of put Band-Aids on certain things and then other things get neglected. And then now those are out of whack and then you have to deal with that. So it's like you're just playing whack-a-mole all the time there. And again, it ultimately comes back to these lifestyle habits, the good general habits of resistance training and things like that. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. And then if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. You can find me there. That's it for now. I'll talk to you guys soon.